German tanks are lined up in the wheat fields outside Kursk, engines idling in the dark. The crews know the Soviets are waiting for them. What they don't know is how completely the ground ahead has been rebuilt to stop this exact attack. Hours earlier, German soldiers had crossed the lines and warned the Soviets the attack was about to begin. Artillery crews were already at their guns, shells stacked and ready. Behind them stretched minefields, trenches and defensive belts, built during weeks Germany had willingly given away. Citadel was supposed to begin in early May. It's now July 5th. In those missing 9 weeks, Germany's last serious chance to regain the initiative in the east had been turned into exactly the battlefield the Red Army wanted. By the spring of 1943, Germany had just lost an entire army at Stalingrad, and the war on the Eastern Front had stalled into an ugly bulge in the map around a Russian city called Kursk. The bulge stuck out into German lines like a fist, and both armies could see that whoever moved first could try to cut it off at the base and trap everyone inside. Both sides looked at that bulge and saw the same thing, the next battle. German generals wanted to hit it fast before the Red Army could dig in and turn a weak spot into a fortress. A quick win here wasn't just about ground. Hitler wanted to hit the Red Army hard enough that it couldn't launch its own offensive later that year, proof to his own country and everyone watching that Germany still had the initiative in the east. Soviet commanders actually argued about how to handle it. Some wanted to strike first and catch the Germans still forming up. A general named Zhukov pushed the other way. Let the Germans exhaust themselves against a wall of defenses, then hit back once they were spent. Stalin sided with Zhukov and the Red Army started digging almost immediately. So Hitler waited, hoping a bigger, stronger tank force, new Panthers, more Tigers, and a heavy tank killer called the Elephant could close a gap his own generals could already see. In April, his 9th Army commander told him the troops weren't ready yet. In May, Axis forces surrendered in North Africa, and Hitler got nervous the whole Mediterranean was about to fall apart, so he waited to see how bad it would get. Then the rain came, turning every road in the region to mud for weeks straight, slowing everything to a crawl. By June, his own field marshals were warning him the Soviets were getting stronger by the day, and Hitler actually considered letting the Red Army attack first instead. Every single one of those reasons made sense on its own, in the moment. Stacked on top of each other, they cost Germany 9 weeks it never got back. This wasn't simply Hitler ignoring a united group of generals with one clear plan. His own commanders disagreed with each other, and some changed their minds as Soviet defenses kept growing stronger by the week. But Hitler held the final call, and every postponement left him choosing between an attack that kept getting riskier or admitting Citadel shouldn't happen at all. It didn't help that Soviet intelligence had already been picking up signs of the German plan for weeks through more than one channel reaching Moscow, well before those deserters ever crossed the line on July 4th. By the time Hitler finally gave the order, there was no version of this attack that still had surprise on its side, no matter how many tanks came with it. German planners had badly underestimated how much strength the Soviets could gather behind Kursk. Every week, Hitler waited for more tanks, more Soviet troops and reserves arrived behind the defensive belts. The extra weeks weren't buying Germany an advantage, they were burning one. The Red Army didn't spend that time sitting still either. Soviet commanders had already guessed almost exactly where the attack would land, and by July they'd built 6 defensive belts, one behind another, deep enough that a German tank crew could break through the first line and still have 5 more waiting on the other side. Engineers laid almost 1 million mines by hand. Nearly 300,000 civilians, many of them women, dug trenches and gun pits day after day until entire sections of the salient looked less like a battlefield and more like a maze built to kill tanks one at a time. When Citadel finally launched on July 5th, some of the brand new Panther tanks Hitler had waited 9 weeks for broke down before they even reached the fighting. Engine fires, transmission failures, the kind of problems you only find by actually using a tank in combat. German infantry moving in behind the armor found a landscape that didn't match the maps they'd studied. Fields were sown with mines under fresh dirt, and guns they couldn't see opened up from positions dug so low only the barrels showed above ground. In the south, German formations broke through much of the first Soviet defensive belt on the opening day and pushed into the next line soon afterward. Soviet commanders were alarmed by how quickly some sectors had been penetrated. Months of preparation were supposed to hold longer than that. But every mile the Germans gained came at a price. Mines packed with extra artillery shells were tearing tracks off tanks that never fired a shot. Even tanks that survived the mines were getting separated from their infantry, forced into narrow cleared lanes and exposed to Soviet guns positioned in depth. The Germans could keep moving, but only by spending time, machines and men they couldn't easily replace. In the north, Model's 9th Army had a much harder time from the start. Mines, artillery, and repeated Soviet counterattacks slowed it almost immediately. Within days, the northern pincer was stuck well short of the breakthrough Citadel needed, and a Soviet general ordered his own tanks to stop charging German armor head-on. Too many crews had already died, learning that lesson the hard way. In the north, the attack was already dying. If you're not subscribed yet, this is exactly the kind of story we cover every week. Back to the south, where the real collision was still coming. In the south, the real collision came on July 12th near a village called Prokhorovka. The Soviet 5th Guards Tank Army attacked across broken ground split by a railway embankment, an anti-tank ditch, and narrow approaches. Instead of catching the Germans out in the open, many Soviet crews drove straight into prepared German positions. Some of the fighting collapsed into brutal close range, but this wasn't the clean, equal, head-on tank duel the old legend made it out to be. On the ground, it wasn't close. German Tiger and Panzer crews held their position and inflicted a heavy defeat on the attacking Soviet tank army. And it still didn't matter. That same morning, the Red Army launched Operation Kutuzov against the Orel salient north of Kursk. German reserves meant for Citadel now had to turn around and meet a Soviet offensive threatening Model's flank and rear. 2 days earlier, the Allies had landed in Sicily, creating another crisis Hitler couldn't ignore. Neither event alone ended Citadel instantly. Fighting in the south actually continued for several more days, but together they exposed the real problem. Germany had started an offensive without enough reserves to control what happened outside it. Soviet soldiers moving into the fight near Orel described German planes hammering them from above for hours, the ground shaking under them. Nothing to do but stay in a hole and wait it out. By August, Soviet troops had pushed the Germans out of Orel and Belgorod, and by the 23rd, out of Kharkov too. Together, these operations became the Red Army's first successful strategic summer offensive of the war. The human cost was staggering on both sides, and 50 days of fighting left the ground around Kursk littered with burned-out tanks and unmarked graves. Historians still argue about the exact numbers today. The Soviets suffered heavier losses, but still had fresh armies and replacement tanks ready to keep attacking. Germany's losses were smaller, but its experienced crews were much harder to replace, and its growing tank production still couldn't match Soviet replacement capacity, while Germany fought an expanding war on several fronts. Here's the part that's easy to miss under all the tank numbers. Hitler didn't just postpone a battle by 9 weeks. He traded a chance that was already shrinking for tanks that weren't ready either, then sent those tanks into a battlefield that had been rebuilt on purpose to stop them. Nobody can say for certain an earlier attack in May would have worked. The Soviets were already digging in before Hitler ever gave the final order, and Germany was already outnumbered in almost every category that mattered. But every week he waited, the ground under his own army's feet got harder to cross, and the enemy waiting on it got stronger. Within a year, the army that had waited behind those minefields outside Kursk was hundreds of miles farther west. Germany would still counterattack, it would still win local battles, but it would never regain control of the war in the east. The 9 weeks Hitler had spent waiting were gone, and after Kursk, so was the initiative. I'm Zumbo. If you made it this far, you're already part of the quest. Subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.